So I'd like to introduce the first session that we're going to start with today. I'm really, really proud that these three people are not only here today as publica speakers, but are also part of the global innovation community. When I first discovered Anna Waldman-Brown, I was just like a fangirl of hers online because I saw all the amazing things she did, and I was like, oh my goodness, I really want to meet this person one day. She works at Autodesk and the Fab Lab Foundation. She is an MIT graduate and a Fulbright scholar, and I highly encourage you to check out her bio, because if you read all the amazing things that she's done in her life already, it's really hard to believe that she's only the young woman that she is today. Anna also has published so many open resources and materials on the maker movement. She publishes some of the most comprehensive articles in the field. So whether it's like the practical work that she does or the intellectual work that she does, highly worth checking out. I'm also equally proud to introduce Chinmayi SK. Chinmayi is the global coordinator of Random Hacks of Kindness. She also builds open technologies, including an open technology platform to fight against violence against women. She has been a very substantial person building up hackerspaces and open source communities in India, but also in other places in the world. And the third person who's going to be in this panel is also as amazing. This is a really, really fabulous opening to the show. Bilal Ghalib is one of those people. Without him, the world just wouldn't be as fabulous. He's one of those people who make sure that with all this dynamic in the maker movement, that we are still mindful and think about what it is that we do. From Bilal, the fantastic quote comes, "If we have the power to create anything, what is it we're going to create?" Kind of like that. Bilal is also the founder of a network called Gemsi, which brings together hackerspaces, makers in different corners of the world. He's helped build up hackerspaces in Iraq and other countries in the Middle East. And like I said, I'm really proud to have all three here today. They've worked together, especially Anna and Chinmayi, but also Bilal, on mapping the global maker movement and finding out what is it that drives this global movement of makers. Where do they live? How do they exist? And what is it that they do? What is it they have in common? And it is that work and that research that they're going to present to us this morning. So please give a really, really warm welcome and a big round of applause to Anna, Chinmayi, and Bilal in Search of Makers.
Thank you for that very warm introduction.
Super warm.
We are here to talk about, among other things, how we found, 200-something innovation spaces across India in a crazy rental car road trip, which took us from Ahmedabad all the way north to Jaipur and then down to the southern tip of Trivandrum. So makerspaces. One of the things that I particularly admire about all of these communities is it provides a way for all these creative people to really gather together in a way that hasn't been possible except for through universities. So I was a bit of a lonely nerd until I found MIT.
Do you want to see how many people know what a makerspace or a hackerspace is?
Good question.
Yeah. So who here has heard of a makerspace or a hackerspace? Who here hasn't? Okay. Cool. So
right.
what do you think it is? Can you just describe what you're imagining one of these spaces could be like?
Maybe just an innovation hub to talk about some ideas and create something either physical or just concept-based ideas.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We define them as creative spaces that are open to collaboration, that have technology, and that are working on innovation, something new, whether that's like knitting or handicrafts or metalworking or up to 3D printing, digital fabrication, automation, things that attach to your brain and read your brain waves. And so they're kind of like a way for people who would generally only have access to these communities and universities to access. As you can see, they're all over the place.
So when we started this journey, we had very little idea of what we will count as community spaces. We just went in the search of how people are learning, how people are communicating, how people are inviting communities into their spaces. And that's how we started the road trip. And we met amazing group of people like this. This is Deepak. He's a part of Walnut Innovations. It's a small space in a city called Udaipur. And he has this amazing passion for building tech, and he owns a 3D printer, the only 3D printer in that entire city. And the things that he does are so amazing. Like, he just built an open source cooker for roti maker for communities in and around him. He built models for missionary. He actually went out to manufacturing units and started innovating with them new ways of building something. And this was so much on the contrary to what you would expect of a makerspace or a fab space, where you need like a huge space or you have huge machinery. But this is all he had, like one room and then maybe the 3D printer, and you can see the electronics out here. And he was encouraging all these young makers to come learn electronics, to do manufacturing, to build innovation. And we met one of these awesome engineers there called Ashin. She was this young 22-year-old Muslim Indian who would never get a chance to go out and learn electronics. But there she was learning electronics, she was doing pen testing, she was building her own circuits. It was amazing how these smaller spaces were changing the world. So we were like, okay, if there is one space like this, are there more spaces like this? And that's how we started our road trip. We went for a road trip of 2 weeks in a rental car, which broke down. And we drove the middle of the night. We couldn't stop. And
Yep, except for parties. This one was at 4 in the morning, right by Trivandrum in southern India.
And this was how we drew. That's
Paul's car getting stuck in the bushes.
Yeah. So, we were so amazed to find around 200 spaces like this. We saw spaces as small as what Walnut was and as big as this room and bigger than that in urban spaces. That is where we started this idea of how do we include community spaces, how do we talk about them, how do we bring that to the notice of the world, and that's where our journey started.
Like this one's in a closet in Rajesh Nair's parents' house down in Trivandrum.
Yeah, so the next stopover we went was Finland, and in Finland we had a totally different experience. So they had makerspaces and fab labs in universities and schools, and this particular fab lab is in Westmanar. It's a small island of Iceland. Sorry, I said Finland. Correction, Iceland. Sorry.
It's off the coast of Reykjavik,
India.
where all of the puffins are. So you can see this is Frosty Gislason with his puffin in the window.
You know, I was thinking just for a second while you were doing that tour across India, that it's very special that they can be these small spaces, and it's just having a little bit of different idea about ownership that really transforms a person with some tools into maybe a closet of a community hub. And I did a tour in 2009 across America, a very similar tour when hackerspaces were kind of taking off in the States. And I found that same sort of feeling. It's really welcoming and inclusive.
Yeah.
You had like 200 homes across India all of a sudden.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was. The interesting thing that we found in Iceland, or I found in Iceland, was how this hub or fab lab was changing the community. This is actually in a port. It's in shipping port, and there is all this printed material that's on the wall, and there is this entire design below there. If you can see this wing and all this, all that was built in that fab lab. And in fact, the Fab Lab was empowering the local community to build up design. We saw places around that small island, which were using Fab Lab to prototype and build textiles, to build community spaces, to build restaurants. So it was amazing to see how these community spaces were transforming, whether they were in a small house or in a big Fab Lab. And that's something that I loved doing as a part of this.
Yeah, and this is a little park where you can sit down on benches, and the Fab Labs recorded older people around the island telling stories from 50, 60 years ago of the history of the island, of the volcano that wiped out a third of all of the houses on the island. So you can sit on these benches and press the buttons, and the Fab Lab has wired all these things up to be this totally interactive, immersive experience that tells the history of what's happened in Investment Hour.
Ah, yes, my habibi. So this guy is Saleh Zain. When I first met him, I think he was 16 years old. And I don't know, who here has heard of Iraq? It's a country in the Middle East. No, I mean for real. I like audience participation. I don't like feeling like I'm alone in a bubble. Come on, I at least want to see you guys raise your hands. Okay, cool. So everyone's heard of this country. What did you, yay, Juliet!
Juliet is here!
Gangsta, right over here, number one. Gangsta's Paradise from last night, if you guys remember. Okay, so all of you have heard of Iraq, but what have you heard about Iraq? You can yell out what you've heard.
It's a thumbs down
Thumbs
from
down.
the audience.
Anybody else? I know you've heard of something about Iraq. What do you hear about Iraq?
I hear about a war starting in 2003 or way before, actually, 1991.
Yeah, 91 wars. Anybody else heard of anything? Oil, interesting.
Health issues, and even children died
actually
because of not extraordinary sicknesses, but because there was no help, nothing available. And I think that's also one of the roots for the IS, how it got so heavy and so anti-human.
So that's very true, and surprisingly, you point out something that's happening in this picture right now. So most people, when they think of Iraq, they think of the bombs, and they think of the violence. And I'm from Iraq, that's where my family's from, and that's initially my impression. When I told my parents I was going back for the first time after many years, they're like, what are you doing? Don't you know what it's like there? It's terrible, you're gonna kill yourself. But I found this guy, his name is Saleh Zain. And what he's doing right now is we're trying to create a DIY prosthetic socket for my cousin who had some challenges during those sanctions and lost his leg due to diabetes. Most people have an easy time controlling diabetes, but things get kind of tough when medication's hard to find and when the health system is so destroyed. And so he lost his leg due to bad circulation. And I've been seeing a part of this developing ecosystem of community spaces all over the world. I've been doing it, I guess even since since 2006, when I started my first community space for creativity in Michigan. And initially we were just doing like a music venue and an art gallery, and at some point I had this thought, like what would happen if this creative capability was brought to a place that seemed to have no possibility, right? Where people didn't have any hope for a future that was going to be something they could participate in. What if we told them that they could create their own futures? And so I thought, like, yes, perfect timing. Let's, like, the Middle East is crumbling. This is the right time. So let's go back to home, or where my parents are from. And I met this kid, Saleh. And one of the first projects that we did was we tried to use smooth-on and 3D scanning. We scanned my cousin's leg to try to make a mold that fit right up against his stump to create more comfort, so he can move his leg, so he could have more comfort walking. And that's kind of the question that I've been asking, is how does all of this unlocks creativity unlock a beautiful future? And so if you can go to the next slide, I think. This is kind of the stuff that you see at like hackerspaces and maker fairs. And don't get me wrong, I love flying ostriches.
Yeah, this is a taxidermied ostrich that has been given flight.
It's amazing and hilarious, and people learn a lot. It takes a lot of like technical know-how to make an ostrich fly. Ostriches, nature took thousands and millions of years to evolve an ostrich, and they didn't figure out how to make it fly. But we did, with quadcopters. And I love it. It's beautiful, it's hilarious, it makes people smile. It might inspire new thinking, but doesn't seem appropriate when we're confronting like cataclysmic change, climate change, when bombs are going off. And so I've been looking at all this open source software and all this open source hardware and these open communities and thinking like, man, this is like half an inch away from beautiful and tending towards maybe meaninglessness or hilarity. And so when you can take the choice between hilarious and beautiful, I think it would be cool to do something beautiful. And so we took one of these open source Geiger counters. It's a thing that measures radiation. And one of the first projects that we were doing in Basra was to attempt to map radiation because people were claiming that they were getting sick because of the depleted uranium that was deposited through artillery fire of tanks over the last 20 years of war. And so we took these tools out to try to tell a story about what you can do with open source tools and technology. And I think it's really important, but not to be browbeating. That's the thing. You know, like this is actually something that I want to talk with everyone on stage about. It's like, it's important to have that playfulness. I mean, that's what drew me in. You know, like you were talking about finding your friends, right? Like being a geek and being like, oh, like you don't really know who to hang out with. And then suddenly finding all these beautiful people that want to help you make and feeling creative.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we've all had this experience.
And we've got that, just to introduce Juliet quickly, who is a wonderful former Fab Lab Nairobi and iHub significant participant in all of those, the whole tech scene in Kenya, Silicon Savannah, if you heard about that yesterday, as well as doing amazing things with local artisans.
Oh, yeah.
Like these Fundi workshops here.
Yeah, so as Anna mentioned, I run Fundi workshops in Kenya, and basically we've been running workshops in like the larger East African market, and this has just been such a, like Bilal mentioned, such a fun experience. I think there's the one side where you're very excited to share all this information, and you're like, you really want to start a hardware movement, but I think one thing you're never ready for is just how much you'll enjoy it yourself, how much you see people enjoying being able to create different things, build different things, grow their networks and their knowledge, and just like see the evolution of their ideas. And so we've just run a couple of series of workshops ranging from electronics into hardware into human-centered design. And the whole idea is to get young people to feel like they can be creative problem solvers, or who can just expand the realm of their creativity into a more tangible environment. Yeah.
What is that?
Oh, so that is a bicycle blender, and actually learned about that when I did a program in Brazil by the IDIN MIT network. And so what they do is they bring in a group of designers and engineers from all over the world, and you spend 1 month immersed in the community and identifying one challenge with the community and collaboratively developing that. So one of the projects that came from there was the bicycle blender. And so when I came back to Kenya, this was really one of like the stronger inspiring ideas that kind of gave birth to Fundi, that the idea that you can bring people from different backgrounds and have them share a common cause and a common goal and build up on that. So one of the things we do is like we run people through what we call build its, and this is generally getting people to build a project together, and I take them through the different stages. There's the one side where you can teach people how to do electronics, but the other side is teaching them like the different stages that go into building a project and making it work. And I think it's exciting seeing them both like struggle through it and then make it happen and then get excited about like the next thing they're going to work on. So that's really just like helped kind of grow that community. Yeah.
Yeah, and to Bilal's point, this struggle and this sense of creativity is something that I think I personally have seen across both taxidermied ostrich quadcopters, as well as much more meaningful projects like this.
I think it's important to have a very good mix of the both. Sometimes just being playful and just doing and taxidermy turkey is good enough in a place where you haven't touched electronics. That's something that makes a lot more impact sometimes, and sometimes meaningful projects. I'm with you on the meaningful projects. We need to do more, and coming from a humanitarian and gender space, I know how much we still need tech to build or bridge that gap and to make interactions more meaningful. We have a long way to go. We just have simple interfaces to deal with any kind of issues, which I think needs more creativity, more innovation, and I hope that this fun taxidermy turkey building leads to something as meaningful as this.
Yeah, I think so. In our time remaining, we know people in most countries, I would say, like the majority of the world's countries. So do you guys have questions for us or for each other about what all of this means and where the overall maker movement is going?
Sure.
If not, we'll continue to talk amongst ourselves. Yeah, Pavel.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, because I've seen a lot of phases of maker movement around the world. So, for example, in Germany, it's focused mostly on a hacker scene. And I think in US, there are several like hacker innovation spaces. But in all the other places, I've seen mostly makerspaces. So do you distinguish between different kinds? Is there any kind of useful distinction?
So, yeah, Bilal and I just worked on this with the Autodesk Foundation. Maker spaces sort of came about through Maker Faire and the Maker movement, as promoted specifically by Make magazine, because they felt that hack was too political. And in fact, many hackerspaces that I've talked to are not that happy about the term makerspace being applied as sort of a blanket, because they are political. They're doing things like mapping radiation in Kosovo, which is inherently political, and they don't like the sort of friendly hobby implication of the makerspace.
I think it's something that's really important to recognize that this is not new. And the words that you're using are fairly new, at least in the Ngram that you look on the internet. It will tell you that these just started popping up being in use recently.
We've been having jugaad for centuries. And
what is jugaad?
Oh, jugaad is a term we use in India for hacking anything. So there are people who hack vehicles to their water connections, to electric meters, to anything to get their work done. And that's what we use as a blanket term for jugaad. And it's important, it's so nice to see how jugaad plays out in innovation and sustainability. I think there is a book on that, which can explain a little bit more on that.
Or in Kenya as well.
I think we'd mentioned this last year, but like the Kenyan term for jugaad would be fundi. And I think it has like different implications. On one side, you think like of someone who can like get stuff fixed for you. And then the other side, you think of like a hacker. I think like the hacker word really hasn't penetrated in East Africa, but when you say fundi, it's like, oh, I know what you're saying. Like that guy who just like tinkers and does his own and like figures things out on his own. And because that's centuries old, it's really hard to see whether the rise in makers is recent. I think it's always been part of different cultures around the world.
It's in the media now.
The really important difference, though, is that this is the community-centered nature. Like the kind of hacking, the person that can do it on their own, the do-it-yourself kind of stuff, is very different than a lot of the spaces and the communities that we've been showing. And even those are centuries old. I mean, there's the cafe culture in Europe, and then Benjamin Franklin in America with his leather apron club, he would get people together and be like, yo bros, listen, have you learned anything that's useful for basically anything? Like,
which is like the Arab Golden Age.
Yeah.
Like thousands of years ago.
The Library of Alexandria had people dissecting things right next to scribes talking about grammar of the language. These spaces are very old, and these are just different models. And I don't mind. I'm excited to see the hackerspace model and the makerspace model and the tech shop model and the Fab Lab model and the Ice Hub model and the I'm sure we
the appropriate technology.
the iHubs. Like, all these models are beautiful and great. Whichever one fits for your community, go for it.
Yeah, we might have time for one more question. Andrew.
Sorry.
Thank you. Really, thank you so much for all of your work. My question's about the way that these networks and makespaces, hackerspaces, fab labs, iHubs, the way they get used by others. I'm thinking specifically companies and politicians. Is there, certainly what I've seen in the UK is that, that politicians like to turn up and be photographed around a makespace and be associated with that kind of thing, but actually don't really contribute anything to it. And many companies behave in a similar way. Have you got sort of stories on sort of both ends of the spectrum, a positive or negative experience that you've seen around the world about how these sorts of movements might be being used and abused by others?
The story, a certain large Asian country was recently opening a huge fab lab. And there's a friend of mine from MIT went over to help get the lab set up and run a workshop. And a week before her workshop, she arrived, and there was actually no equipment in the lab. And the lab manager said, "We're really sorry, we've been too busy taking photos with all of these politicians to celebrate the fact that we're opening this fab lab to actually buy any of the equipment. So here's $100,000. I know you don't speak our language, but please run around and buy all of the equipment you need in order to run your workshop in a couple days." So that's like on the one extreme of the spectrum.
There's positive relationships between governments and spaces. I mean, one of the important things in Basra, I wish the Basra, Iraq guys were here, but they're a space in a country that is terrified of makers because what people generally make, assume people are making are weapons. And so importing is really hard, especially importing scary-looking equipment. And so they're developing relationships with the governments to make that kind of process easier, and they're actually making some headway. And I'm sure positive, negative across the board.
Yeah, in India, Kerala, the government of Kerala is actually supporting making and makerspaces. They, in fact, opened 2 fab labs and funded them wholly. And they also funded some thousands of kits, open hardware kits for school kids, and they funded the workshops. So there is good amount of support from governments and institutions looking back there.
Yeah, when they recognize it's the community much more than the actual tools and equipment and space.
I think it's a bit of both. So the first thing is, I think sometimes the government doesn't understand what this movement is. And so in Kenya, I did see like they did come on board with the Fab Lab, a bit with the iHub. But I think there just has been a sort of inertia to just like come in on early. I think they come in when people have really like found different people to support them. And I think that's kind of where the problem is, that because government has such a vast reach, it always makes me wonder why we only have like 2 fab labs in Kenya. So I had one in the university I went to, and they could easily have just replicated that all over the country, but it's just that inertia. Like they do come on board, but like not at the right time, and so
or it's all about the photo ops.
Right. So they'll come in and like walk around the fab lab and like point at projects. But I think like going beyond like building it, how do you make sure that people can build like really cool projects, spread them out? How do you make it beyond just like the FaceTime?
Yeah.
I have a question for you guys. I know we got to wrap up, but you guys are all special because you're here. Congratulations and welcome. You're here because you're interested in global development and community spaces and innovation. You're curious about these kinds of things. And I would like to suggest that you're sitting next to somebody and that we are already a part of a community. Like I can see a lot of familiar faces and new faces that I'm sure will be my friends. And one of the things that I love about these spaces, like you're talking about people that can like accomplish their visions and their ideas and supporting each other. Like, do you have a vision or a mission? And when you're walking out, when we're all done wrapping up, talk to the person next to you about it and see what they think. Get some feedback. Maybe you can get some support or encouragement, or maybe even just talking about it with someone will help you refine it or take another step further. And I really encourage you to do this. So take 1 second to make eye contact with the person sitting next to you, and then we'll carry on and wrap up.
And we have an amazing next speaker talking about more humanitarian makerspaces. So thank you, everyone, and we will hang around to answer further questions.
You